Bill Horn salute. Been doing these untold truth things about my experience in the Army. I'm getting a few views and all that, so that's kind of cool. And it's like, why write a book when I could just tell a story, throw it on YouTube? If it gets a couple views, great. And if it don't, no big deal. I don't make a fucking dime doing it. And there's no decapitated heads, crispy critters, no mutilated villagers, dead women and children, no napalm strikes, none of that bullshit, because it was peacetime Army. In fact, the world was changing by the time the 1980s rolled around. I was born in the 60s, grew up in the 70s. And in the 70s, the draft stopped. In 1973, America pulls out of Vietnam, and we have this great big black eye, and the Army is going through a transition period because it don't know what to do, shit or go blind. Then you got a Russian problem in Europe. Oh, and don't forget the DMZ in Korea. So all this change is going on, and it's starting to catch up by the 1980s. They really took care of the job market. They really took care of the World War II guys in Korea. But by the time I'm entering the job market and that, there's no... the thought of going to a big university and playing football was out of the question. It was already costing too much money. Like go to the University of Missouri, Kansas, play football on a scholarship and maybe make the NFL. That was starting to get a little... It was achievable still, but it was getting to be out of reach just a little bit for some people. And for us, it was getting to be a little bit out of reach. And anyway, by the time I got through junior high school and the abuse I took through there and that bullshit in high school, the jocks and the freaks bullshit, I was done. I used to play football. Oh, I used to love playing football. And then, because that jock and freak thing growing up, you choose, by the time you hit ninth grade, you're going to choose one side or the other. And it's like, fuck playing football. I'm going to go home after school and get high as fuck and watch Tom and Jerry cartoons and shit. And that's what we did, man. That was kind of fun. So by the time I'm 17, my mom's not around, my stepdad's not around, and me and my sister are pretty much on our own. And I was starting to ride motorcycles. When I was 16, I was over at a friend's house, and we were looking at these Easy Rider magazines. I'd never seen one before, and thought, wow, man, what a lifestyle. This is kind of cool. I didn't want to belong to a gang, but I wanted to ride a bike and travel around, see the country on two wheels, and just live that wild and free lifestyle. I didn't know no better, okay? And I'll be honest with you, with all the drugs and shit I was doing as a kid, I absolutely had no ambitions. I didn't know where to go get a job. You get what I mean? You mean you get out of school, you work. I mean, I worked with my stepdad doing asphalt through the summer, and I could watch this guy work 2 hours and make $300. I thought, damn, man. It's hard to hold a job when you remember, yeah, I used to work for a guy. He could work 2 hours, make $300, call it a day, hit the bar and go hit the golf course and do the same thing the next day. So I started riding motorcycles, and I was on a small bike, thank God, because if I was on a bigger bike, I probably would have got killed. I'm not going to give up the size of my bike, though. It's embarrassing because everybody, I rode the biggest, baddest bike in the world, but you have to start small before you get to that big bike. So I'm on a little bike, and let's just say maybe 300cc or lower, who knows. It was more than 150, though. Give me a break. So anyway, I got this really nice Yamaha street bike, and I rode this motherfucker everywhere. And I had a lot of close calls, too. I mean, me being stupid, going too fast. I almost hit a truck head on. Boy, I avoided that. I had a car pull out on me. Going to run a yellow light. Car pulls out on me. So I had a choice, hit the car in the back end or take out the gravel driveway at the bar here. And luckily the car turned. So I had a lot of close calls. Damn near hit a possum at 70 miles an hour in the dark one night. But I'd take this fucking bike, and I lived on it all summer. And I would go from like Raytown to Warrensburg, which is a good 50 miles or so one way, and then to 50 miles back. And I lived as much as I could on the highway, and eventually, long story short, I had a motorcycle wreck. One day I had to pee real bad. I got pulled over, first ticket. Then I had this motorcycle wreck. And what was funny about my motorcycle wreck was I had a ticket, needed to find where I paid the ticket, and I wrecked right in front of the Lee Summit Police Department. No shit, right in front of the cop shop. I had my first wreck I caused, and it was on a motorcycle. I sideswiped a car, and I hit my fucking head, and nobody checked me out, but I think I had probably a concussion. And I went through the process of being rode up and all that, and nobody helped me, so I had to start pushing my bike back towards home. Eventually, some guy in a truck, I gave him $10. He hauled me to Raytown, had him drop me off at the top of this hill, and I walked my bike home. Went and told my mom just had a wreck, and I'm in deep shit. So my stepdad bails me out of trouble. I was looking at 6 days in jail, and there was over $350 in fines, and I had to go to driving school for a weekend to learn how to re-drive again so I can get my license. So by the time all this is done, I'm done driving for a while. Okay, I got myself in a lot of fucking trouble. I'm done driving. And I think it was 2 days after my wreck, I went down and drank a bunch of grain alcohol. I got this tattoo here. My mom saw that a few days later, caused some issues, and I ended up getting kicked out of my house for a couple weeks. So I was looking at jail, looking at all these fines. My stepdad covered my ass. Now I'm in trouble with my mom, got this tattoo, and I'm kicked out of my house, and now I'm not going to school, so I missed a couple weeks of school. And then I finally went back to my mom and says, look, can I finish school? Can I finish school and I'll figure out what I'll do from there? No, I wanted to graduate, get a bigger motorcycle, and just start that biker fantasy. That shit didn't work. So it's kind of a dark period in my life. It's kind of hazy. I don't really remember that. I did a lot of drugs and shit, and I just know I was in trouble. So finally it just dawned on me I need to get the fuck away. So I got in trouble in October, about 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. So December, right before Christmas, I started going down to the recruiter at the Army, and I said, oh, I want to be infantry. I've always wanted to be infantry, and I'm not going to sign the fucking paper unless I am infantry. And he said, okay. Because you had to be real specific back then, or you were going to get fucked, and you're going to still get fucked anyway. No, originally I thought about tanks, but when I saw one of those things explode, I didn't want no part of dying like that. So no, I went in the infantry. Now, when you went down for your SMART test, it was still on paper. The second time I went for the SMART test, it was on computer, and I saw math I'd never seen before. Oh, Jesus Christ. I think I just click. The new test on the computer was way different than the one I took on paper. And by the way, my dad, who was a draft dodger, asked, how did you get out of the draft, dude? And he said, well, when I took the SMART test, I was dumber than a rock. He was too stupid to be a Navy cook. Well, I took the same test on fucking paper. Yeah, I was still counting on my fingers, and I could spell a few words and figure out a few things. So I qualified for infantry and all that. So what led me up to signing was I got into a lot of fucking trouble. I'm a fucking drug addict with no future, and my ambition in life was to ride a fucking motorcycle. So that was me before I go into the Army. So I just did this thing, a video about harassment. So here's this wild teenager on drugs, riding motorcycles, just got in a bunch of fucking trouble, just enlisted on a delayed entry program. Oh, and Jody, there is such a thing as Jody. And I could never get a girlfriend in high school. Finally, somebody calls me one night, and I mean, her name was Sharon. We get along, we're playing kissy face, and I'm really hooked on this girl. I finally found something, but goddamn, I've just enlisted in the fucking Army. And I get in the Army and I find out I'm not so cool. This biker image thing I was working so hard to develop was thrown aside. I realized real quick, you don't ride a motorcycle everywhere. You're going to have to find a working job and support yourself and all this other shit. So I had to grow up real quick. Nobody explained shit to me. You kind of had to learn things on your own growing up back then. People wouldn't sit down with you yet and talk to you. You had to figure shit out as you went. So yeah, all of a sudden I'm cool fitting in. And in fact, I was one of the first people in my high school to shoot up. And I actually had party bitches calling me wanting to hook up with me so they could party. And it's like, all of a sudden I went from this biker thing to a piece of shit. I went to being a fucking piece of shit. I went to being a fucking target. I went to being fucking harassed. And what a switch up within a year's time. Yeah, I turned 18, got in trouble. By the time I'm 19, I'm guarding an empty building with maybe a Bradley in it, run a bayonet course. By the time I turn 20, I'm getting 2 Article 15s, lost rank and pay. But now, by the time I'm out of the Army, and I'm finishing with this, is I go right back to the same shit. I got away for a while. Everything kind of smoothed itself over. You know, I had to vanish for a little bit. So I got back, and it was right back to the same shit. But what was cool is I turned 21, and the Kansas City Royals went to the World Series and won that motherfucker for the first time. I was sitting there, I had some German dark beer. I'm watching the TV in my mom's living room, and that was neat as fuck. Oh, my first 2 weeks in 1985, I was out of the Army. I went and saw Deep Purple. So no, I fucked up, and it led me into trouble, and it got me in the Army. I didn't want to drive. In fact, they forced me to drive. I learned how to drive a stick on a Jeep. I ended up wrecking a truck. And this lieutenant, he was in the 173rd in Vietnam. He goes, well, didn't you want to drive? And I'm like, no, I don't want to drive because I got in all this trouble. I said, well, I drove in Nam. I'm thinking, well, good for you, but I don't want to drive. I didn't want to drive. And still, I get a wreck and join the Army. I get in another wreck in the Army and get crucified. I got a 1969 Cougar. I had to put a lot of money in it. It was a cherry car when it showed up. It had got destroyed. I think I paid $150 for this thing, and I put $600 in it and took that thing back home. But it was right back to the same thing, back down to my friend's house, partying, drinking, trying to find hit and miss jobs. I mean, my mom would bitch at me, I'm working as hard as, why don't you get a real job? At least I'm working. Yeah, at least I'm working, at least I'm trying. And I'm going to leave it at that. So it's funny, from the frying pan into the fire, out of the fire back into the frying pan, and doing the same old fuck up things. And here's what, in 1985 in August, methamphetamine started creeping in, and it started to become regular towards the end of the 80s into the 90s. It was still kind of an underground thing. I think I've talked about that. So no, it's recruiters today are having issues. One, you're going to have criminals. You're going to have, it's always been this way. It's always been, you like in Nam, oh, well, it's either go to jail or go to Vietnam. Your choice. I think a lot of people had that choice. They got in trouble, and all right. It's always been drug addicts. It's always been the dregs of society who is always willing to enlist. It's always been people like that. Since even the Duke of Wellington called his soldiers dogs, because they're all criminal types. It's always been that way. And with these people today with no nationalism, patriotism, and they're so tight now in their requirements, no drugs, no troubles, and that, well, you just cut out your target audience. So horn salute, hit the like and subscribe. I don't know how many videos I can come up. It's kind of little hit and miss ideas now. I've done a lot of these videos now, but trouble. One trouble will lead to another kind of trouble, to more kind of trouble, to, oh my God, I'm in trouble. What did I fucking do to myself to thank God I'm out of this trouble? Look, I'm right back in the same shit I just got out of. Horn salute, out of here.